Hello and welcome to another edition of The Tigers Down Under. I'm your host as always, Alex, and with me tonight I have Logan,
Good evening, everybody.
and we also have Dan.
Hello, everyone.
A bit of a somber week this week as we've had a pretty eye-opening defeat to Leicester. We built a bit of momentum under Marco Silva, but it all kind of came to a crushing end at the King Power Stadium. Um, we lost the game 3-1 after taking the lead early, and it's a bit tough to take after we'd had some recent momentum against the bigger clubs. So, boys, I've got to start with what went wrong.
Um, Look, a couple of weeks ago, we were talking about whether the trip to Portugal was going to be a good thing or not for the squad. And at the time, I thought it was going to be good. I thought the extra time, the extra training was going to be good to help the team gel and get everything keep moving in the right direction. But I mean, in hindsight, it looks like it might have been the wrong call. That before we had the break, the structure was solid and we were playing the way we wanted to play. But the last couple of games, we seem to have fallen away a little bit. I think you've got to give credit to Leicester in the game on the weekend, though. They came out firing from the get-go and they never really let us settle. So you've got to give credit to them. But I think we really do need to do better in the coming weeks. That's for sure.
I think, yeah, we sort of raised a few concerns about the trip in the sense that, it could go one of two ways, as you've said. It could either really gel the squad, bring them together, give us a bit of an idea about the tactics that Silva wanted to implement, or it could just really disrupt the rhythm that we had. And a concern I had was actually one that I wonder if it's starting to manifest itself, which is that the players might be getting a bit exhausted with Silva seems to be quite full on with his training methods. So there's a few causes of concern there. But one of the really big concerning aspects out of the game on the weekend was how ineffective we were down the right hand side. And it's sort of a concern to see on a day when you have Markovic and El Mohammadi both on that right hand side, both players who have a bit of a reputation for sometimes not going the full 100%, not being completely committed to the cause. But the worrying thing is that we don't have a whole lot of options out there. So what can we actually do if both of them have an off day like they did?
I think it's a very interesting question, and I think that the first probably thing you need to ask yourself is Silva going to persist with, what striking options is he going to take? Are we going to play two up front? And I think that if he decides to do that, that will change the formation a lot, or does he keep to this philosophy of keeping Grzycki and Markovic wide and having that severe pace on both flanks? It's an interesting one, and I think that the players that we probably have to consider is your players like your Josh Tymans coming into the fold, and also maybe even playing Diamande on the wing. We've seen it before, and he has kind of shown in patches that he's certainly willing to put in a shift, as opposed to probably the one major criticism we've got with Markovic at the moment is that he probably isn't as useful in tracking back. I mean, we've also seen Sean Maloney play wide before, but he's probably a much less convincing alternative. So I guess, look, it's a very good question, and I think it's probably one that only Marco Silva could answer. But yeah, it definitely depends on the type of game and opponent that we're playing and kind of, what attacking formation he decides to play. But in saying that, I've been very unimpressed with El Mohammadi since he has returned to the African Cup of Nations, and I wouldn't be surprised to see him spend some time on the bench this weekend against Swansea.
So obviously the right hand side was one of the main concerns out of the game, but in general, I'll get both your thoughts on the game as a whole. We took the lead early through Klukas, which was really impressive to see, and he's now, I think, set a record for scoring in five consecutive seasons, five consecutively high leagues. I saw just before we started recording actually that Alfie Mawson for Swansea holds a similar record, and in some ways a more impressive record in that he's also scored in the five divisions, but he's actually done it one season quicker because he's scored in the Championship and the Premier League this season. So arguably he's actually done that better than Klukas has. But we took the lead, but it was an interesting one because the game was very open to start with and both teams had a few chances, and even though we scored the goal, it didn't seem to affect Leicester's momentum very much, and they just kept pressing us, kept coming at us, and of course that paid dividends for them with not one but three goals in their favour and ultimately the match. But I'll start with you, Dan. What were your thoughts on the game as a whole?
Look, I don't know whether we set up to play in a counter-attacking style, but we seem to be playing that way. But we've played the same formation for weeks and weeks in a row now, and for the majority, we haven't really been playing a counter-attacking style. But against Leicester, that seemed to be the thing. We didn't hold the ball for long enough. We couldn't relieve that pressure that Leicester was putting on us, because all we were doing was every now and then we were actually getting a chance, and making a big run upfield that was involving probably 3 players at most, and then we got the one goal, and the rest of the time it was basically just going to Schmeichel, who was then just it was just going back to Leicester, and they were under the pump the whole time. As we've touched on with the right hand side, was just terrible, and it was they just attacked that side over and over and over. I thought Grosicki again, he for me is really showing that he is up for the battle and wants to help this club. He's starting to pick his fitness up, and it's showing he's digging deep and making big runs. I can remember one run where they put an overlap in behind Robertson, and it looked like they were going to get a clean, easy cross in with no pressure, and he just came out of nowhere and cleaned it up, which is exactly the kind of thing you'd want if only we could have it on both sides of the pitch.
Yeah, I mean, Brzezinski's really looked impressive, and he's certainly the one that's kind of stood out in recent weeks. I think we mentioned him against Burnley, and again against Leicester. He was probably one of our standouts. Logan, who did you see as the standouts in the game, and how did you view the game as a whole?
Yeah, look, certainly Krasicki for mine as well was quite quality, and also I thought Nias was when he had the few opportunities, he looked quite good as well. I still certainly wasn't unimpressed with Ranocchio or Maguire, although at times they did look shaky. They still looked to play out quite a lot. And I guess if you compare the blueprint of what Silva went with, to play Leicester, you kind of know that they're going to be open, and you know that they are going to sort of throw everything at you. If you change what Liverpool did, say when they played them and tried to play very high up the pitch, Leicester opened them up. So I think that probably had a lot to do with the kind of way we set up to play Leicester. And I thought that Silva was kind of wary of their attacking abilities, but also tried to cause them problems. And I think that was reflective of the whole game. The 3-1 result, I thought it's probably a little bit harsh, because when it was 2-1, I thought certainly when Hernandez came on, we looked far more likely to score in the last kind of 10 minutes. And obviously the Huddleston own goal and ended up all hope of anything of the sort happening. But I thought that we looked very promising and could have quite easily have found a second goal and finished the game with a point.
Yeah, we seem to have a lot of sliding door moments in seasons, and they never seem to go in our favour. But Maguire hitting the post early in the second half, if that goes in and suddenly we're up 2-1, it's a very different game.
Yeah, certainly. And so I don't think that the 3-1 scoreline was certainly reflective of the manner. It almost sounds as if Leicester bullied us with that result, and I don't think that was the case at all. So whilst it was a very disappointing result, I don't think that there's anything to be too alarmed at. I think Leicester certainly have turned the corner, and I'd be very, very surprised to find them in the relegation scrap in the next 11, 12 rounds.
And obviously Palace picked up the 3 points away at West Brom, which was a bit unexpected, at least from my point of view. And despite the fact that Middlesbrough lost yet again, it's now 4 points to safety for us. And it's a bit of a concern that all of a sudden we've gone from being 1 point off 15th to 4 points off 17th place. So the question, I guess, has to start to be asked whether or not the 3 relegation places are pretty much set in stone. We might discuss it in a bit more detail when we get to the discussion about the Swansea game, because I suspect if we lose that game, all hope will just about be lost. But talking on in more positive tones, or potentially positive tones, we'll talk about our player of the week now, which is Abel Hernandez, who has been a bit of an enigma in his time at the club. We've had the mixed bag from him, with a brilliant season last year with 20 goals in 39 appearances, which at a goal more than less than 2 in less than 2 games is a pretty good strike rate for a City striker in recent years at least. And it's amazing he's actually made 93 appearances for us with 30 goals in all competitions. So he's another one where his appearance record has sort of just crept up without really noticing it. He was our record signing from Palermo at the time he signed for the club, when he was our replacement for Shane Long. and he cost £10 million. And there was a lot of excitement about his signing because of the pace he had, the fact he was a Uruguayan international. Not easy to get into that forward line with Suarez up there as well. But I'll start with you, Logan. What is it about Hernandez that seems to make him so inconsistent? He had a pretty shaky first season where he started off pretty well, but seemed to be marred by a couple of patchy streaks with injuries and form issues. But then he was brilliant last year, and he seems to have reverted to form this year in terms of his Premier League form.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. He certainly has been subject to a few injury spells that have kind of cost him from reaching the heights that I guess that we kind of expect from him. And as you mentioned, being the record signing, it certainly comes with that tag that we kind of look to him in most games, for our goal return. And I think that we saw in the championship just the attacking capabilities that he possesses. I think that when he went on that incredible goal-scoring run towards the start of the season, I don't think he'd scored from outside the 6-yard box. So
Yeah.
He certainly offers something that not many other City players in the current squad kind of do, in that he is that poacher and he is a natural goal scorer. But I definitely think that if you think about the time that Abel Hernandez has been at the club, we have played a lot of Premier League games, and we have obviously, being Hull City, have spent a lot more time towards the tail end of the table, and that doesn't always offer the kind of attacking opportunities that you may kind of be presented with at perhaps your bigger clubs. So I think that to his own detriment, not to his own detriment rather, is he doesn't play up front by himself very well, and he has been kind of forced to play that role in many games. So one would argue that the delivery from our midfield hasn't probably given him the chances that he would, that he kind of like to see.
I think
And
one
he
of the,
has been
I think
asked
one
to
of the
play-
frustrating things for him would be, you look at how we played against Bournemouth with him in the side, and he scored 2 goals. And I thought, we finally got a manager who knows how to play or shape the side around Hernandez to get the best out of him, playing the ball along the ground to him, and he took it brilliantly, and he took his chances really well. But we've just sort of reverted to form in terms of hoofing the ball up to him, which, as you say, he's not very good at doing as a lone man.
Yeah, certainly. And I think that just the introduction of Omar Niasse this year, we've been able to see that Niasse obviously plays that role much better. And even at the start of the season, Hernandez being paired with Mbakani looked to kind of have some hope, because it was the idea of having that big striker that Hernandez could play off, which I think is where you'll see Abel Hernandez playing his best football, when he's got someone big and strong to kind of take some pressure off him, and he can play off them. So, look, it's an interesting one, and I think Abel Hernandez, for us, is still by far and away our kind of marquee signing, if you will. And I think that he still has a lot of a huge role for the run-in. And I think if City are to stay up, his name will certainly be one of the names mentioned as the major contributors as to why we're still there.
Dan, what's your opinion on Hernandez's time at the club so far? And there always seems to be talk in the off-season, especially from his agent, that he's looking for a move elsewhere. Do you think he'll be a City player next season, assuming we're in the Premier League? And what's your overall opinion of him?
On whether he will be a City player next year, honestly, I'm doubtful. I mean, his agent is working overtime in the last few, just about every transfer window since he signed. He's been linked with going back to Italy, or he's going somewhere, and then it was China recently, and then there's no offers, but there's offers, and there's all sorts of things up in the air. And I think he's a quality player, but as we touched on, when he's on his own, I think he does lack the physicality to play up front on his own. He does need someone else there. He's the sort of player, if you can get him the ball in the box, he will score you goals. And I think, as Logan touched on, that's our biggest problem has been we can't quite get the ball to our players in the right spots. I think Niasse got the ball, I think, 3 times on the weekend in the box, and he had shots, and they were good. But the rest of the time, we're expecting them to receive the ball in positions that they shouldn't be receiving, and I think that's been Hernandez's biggest problem, is that he's never really getting the ball in the positions that would suit him, that he could make a mark.
The only thing I'd counter with that, and I completely agree, because that's the sense that we always get, and I think when he gets the ball on his head, he just doesn't really know what to do with it. He needs the ball along the ground, and even against Bournemouth, when we play the ball along the ground to him, even if it's in those out wide positions where you'd think he's out of position, we saw it last season in the Championship against teams like Burnley, where he can take the ball out wide and actually do quite a lot with it and bring it into a scoring position, and he scored a quite good goal against Bournemouth from that sort of starting position.
Yeah, that's fair. I just think that, like, I mean, I guess like when you're playing a lone striker, you do have to make those runs to be able to receive the ball and be involved in the play. But at the same time, I think as a team, we do need to be trying to assist whether it's him or Nias or whoever who is up front. If we're going to continue with a one man up top, we need to be doing more to support that player in a position which they'll be able to do the most damage.
Absolutely. Well, it's interesting that we come up against Swansea this week, because it's a side Hernandez has already scored twice against this season. Once in our second game of the season away at the Liberty Stadium, and once at home in the FA Cup. I think he scored moments after coming onto the ground. So they're a side that he likes to score against, a side that he can find the net against quite well, and we take them on at home in a pretty do-or-die game at this point of the season. The big threat, I suppose, from Swansea's point of view is Llorente up front, and he's the one that we're going to have to watch. And you suspect that if we're to win the game, Ranocchia is probably the one that'll have to do a pretty good job on him, because height-wise, I think Ranocchia is the one best to go with him. But we sort of started to touch on it in the wake of the Leicester game, and I'll start this discussion to both of you with the question of, if we lose this game, or if we fail to beat Swansea, are we as good as relegated? I'll start with you, Dan.
Yeah, I think at this point in the season and how the last few games have gone, we really can't afford any slip-ups against the teams that are around us. On the weekend is, honestly, it is a must-win game, and if we don't pick up 3 points on the weekend, it's going to put us a long way to relegation. I think if we lose, we are no longer in control of our own destiny, and we start relying on other results to benefit us. And once you get to that point, you're just about as good as gone, I think.
Logan?
My answer is simply no, and the reason is I saw the post-match press conference with Sam Clucas, and he kind of touched on the fact that there's still 11 games to go, and there's still 33 points up for grabs. And you think, well, if you could obtain as many of those 33 points that are kind of on offer, then you're well and truly safe. And I think about some of the games that we have got to come. We still play Palace, we still play Borough, we still play some of the other teams around us. So whilst I think it would be extremely damaging to receive a loss this weekend at the hands of Swansea, I think that there's so many more twists and turns, as we've seen in a relegation battle to come, that nothing can be taken for granted. And I think that kind of attitude that Sam Clucas was kind of portraying is stemming straight from Marco Silva. So I don't think that until the players believe that they're well and truly done and dusted, I think that we've still got a lot of fight on our hands. And I think that, with those big games, the Swansea game, whilst it is incredibly important, I don't think it's the be-all and end-all.
Yeah, I mean, there are still a few teams around the relegation zone who'd be looking over their shoulders, particularly, I think, Bournemouth and perhaps Palace, even though they picked up a good win. Bournemouth just seem to be just about in free fall, even though they got that good point against United on the weekend. So certainly it doesn't seem quite over yet, but it would be a long way back if for instance, Palace can win again on the weekend and we were to lose. The concern we had out of the Leicester game as well was that right-hand side, and you would assume there will be changes to that side of the field, and I think El Abdelawi will come straight back in at right back for El Mohammadi. But do we then also start Markovic again and sort of take the punt that, I think there was an article today that he's a luxury player, but he's one that we have to afford?
Yeah, I certainly agree with that. I read that article. I think it was written by Swanee. And I thought that everything that he had to say was probably the most sense I've heard Swanee talk in a long time, actually. And to be perfectly honest, I did see glimpses of that. I think there was a stage in the game where perhaps 30 minutes in, Markovic had almost been unsighted, and you saw a Leicester player dive in on him, and he sort of jinked away and then carried the ball. I think it was about 40 metres and looked really damaging. And I thought that kind of summed Markovic up. But we don't have players at City really of that type of calibre that can do those things. Yes, he does kind of give us that idea of he slacks off, or he's probably found guilty for not tracking back as much as we'd kind of like. But I think in many senses it was almost the exact situation of carrying Mo Diarmi, who we kind of had the same criticisms of, but then when Mo Diarmi got on the ball, we all knew what he was capable of. And I think that Markovic is in the same bracket, that we have to carry him because he is the kind of player in our squad that can change a game for us, that we desperately will rely on.
So would you both agree, I'll start with you, Dan, would you both agree that perhaps El Abdellaoui comes in for El Mohammadi and perhaps Evandro for someone in midfield? I mean, we looked a bit slow in central midfield as well.
Look, I mean, on Markovic, just quickly, personally, if it was me, I wouldn't start him because his performance was absolutely atrocious, and I think a statement needs to be made that that's not good enough. I would start him on the bench. I would bring him on in the second half and say, here's your chance to show us that you are here to play. Go and play. But in the midfield, Silva likes Evandro. If he's fit and available, I think he will start. And unfortunately, it will probably Klukas who will miss out unless something happens to either Ndai or Huddleston. But that if Markovic doesn't start, do you push Klukas out wide right, or do you put Dio out wide right, or someone like that to accommodate everyone that you want in the team?
And Logan, what are your thoughts on the rest of the side?
Yeah, I think that's exactly what needs to happen. I think Abdellaoui comes straight back in, and I think El Mohammadi makes way. I think there'll certainly be a spot for Evandro if he's provided to be fit. But I would still be keeping Markovic in the side. I just think that Markovic has probably had chances in his career, and he's had the same criticisms at Sporting Lisbon, at Liverpool previously. And I just don't think that, given the fact it's a relegation scrap, it's the right time to be making enemies with him, perhaps to bench him and make him prove his worth. I just don't think that he's the type of player that would respond to that, given the kind of... And I'm not saying that he does deserve the luxury card of being allowed to play however he wants and still gain his spot. I think that he just needs an extra chance, because I thought that you wind back the clock to Arsenal, and I think he was probably our best player on the field, and certainly showed the work ethic that is required for a relegation scrap.
Fair enough. I'll close off then. I'll get from both of you your most memorable fixture against Swansea in recent years. We've had a few of them down the track. And then I'll also get a score prediction. So I'll start with you, Logan.
My most memorable moment against Swansea is actually, when I think about it, I don't know why it stands out the most, but it was Danny Graham scoring. I think it was in a 1-1 draw. And I think that it was just so ironic because the opportunities that Danny Graham was missing in the lead up to that game was just abysmal. And I remember almost every article that got written, certainly in the Daily Mail, was about the need for Danny Graham to start firing, and how's he still in the squad, etc., etc. And then, true to form, obviously, certainly at City, we're familiar with being scored against by ex-players. That was the game that he broke the duck in. And I just thought that the irony of that just seemed to stay with me. But yeah, there's certainly some memorable fixtures against Swansea over the years that we can call on.
And what's your score prediction for this one?
Look, last week I predicted us to dust Leicester, and it didn't happen. But I feel like this is the sort of game where Swansea are a team that we experienced a lot of joy against, and I think that given the magnitude, similar to when we played Bournemouth earlier in the year, we kind of knew that it was a must-win game, and I think that everyone at City is aware of the same thing, and I think that we'll probably end up with a 3-1 victory.
Jeez, pretty impressive. Pretty confident. How about you, Dan? What's your most memorable game against Swansea, and also a score prediction?
Honestly, I can't recall. I don't think I've actually had the opportunity to view too many of our previous fixtures against Swansea, just with whatever the circumstances have been. So I'll just have to go with the game at the start of this year. Like it's probably the only one that I can actually remember. So it is my most memorable.
Fair enough. How do you reckon this game will pan out?
I'm not quite as confident as Logan in the result, but I do think we will get the win. Slightly more conservative, but only a bit, by 2-1.
Fair enough. Yeah, I do think we might edge this one. People have to remember as well that, as well as Clement's been going for Swansea, he was in charge for that FA Cup fixture that we got over them. So it's not as if Silva hasn't come up against him before. Fair enough, that might have been before Swansea had managed to, settle into his tactics and his way of thinking, but it would still give us a bit of a mental edge over them, and hopefully will do us in good stead for this one. I think we'll get up perhaps 2-1 as well, I think. Yeah, I think it'll be too hard to contain Llorente because he's in some pretty impressive form at the moment, but I think if Hernandez starts the game, we should be pretty good for a couple of goals, I think. And then just to close things off, we posted in the Facebook group a bit earlier in the afternoon to ask if anyone had any questions they wanted discussed on the podcast. So I'll fire through them. We've got 4 of them. We'll do them in quick succession. So I'll get a quick thought from each of you on the questions there. There's a few good ones in there. I'll start with you, Logan. We've got a few decent centre backs on our books. If all 4 of them were fit, Davies, Dawson, Ranocchia, and Maguire, who do you start? Who do you leave out?
Given the current form, I can't really see Harry Maguire being displaced. I just think that there's a lot of speculation on whether he's due for his first England cap, and he seems to be kind of our marquee man at the moment. And I would find it very hard to see Silva dropping him. So I think Harry Maguire has to stay. Ranocchia for me as well he hasn't really put a foot wrong since he joined City. And I just think that Davies and Dawson are going to find it hard to work their way back into the side, pending those two stay fit. So I would keep with the centre-backs that we're currently rolling with.
Good call. Dan, what are your thoughts?
I think about the question, and I think in a little bit of a different way that Logan's approached it. But I think if all 4 centre-backs are fit, and it's the first game of the year, I would, without taking into account any form or anything, I would probably go with Maguire and Dawson. Okay.
And so you leave Davies and Ranocchia out in that case. Why would you leave Ranocchia out?
I just...
Is it because of Dawson's captaincy? Or
I would say, just Dawson's... The extra experience, and he reads the game really well. And he's good. He's a really good leader, and those sorts of characteristics he has plenty of.
Fair enough. The next question was in relation to player retention, and it's a question we'll probably discuss a fair bit over the next few months, depending on how the season pans out. But if we were to go down, I think the question was initially phrased of who would stay, but I think it's easier to discuss who do you reckon would be out the door. From my point of view, I suspect, given all of the talk in the papers recently, I think Maguire's almost a certainty to go. Well, I shouldn't say almost. I think he's a certainty to go. And another one, as we've touched on, would be Hernandez. But I'll start with you, Dan. Who are your thoughts on who would leave and who we would be looking to sell, I guess?
I think, as a starting point, if we get relegated, obviously we won't. I don't think we'll be in a position to make a play to try and regain or retain any of the players that we currently have on loan. There's a starting point. Maguire, yes, he will go 100% if we do not stay, and even if we do stay, I think we'll be fighting to keep him. Hernandez, yeah, I've already mentioned earlier. I'd honestly not be surprised to see bids come in for Huddleston in the off season.
Yeah.
Such has been his form. And I think Robertson is a strong chance to get lured away as well, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think I've seen links for him to Liverpool, which don't surprise me too much because I think Liverpool will be on the lookout for a new left-back in the summer. So it'll be interesting to see if he's getting linked to those sorts of clubs. Logan, are there any names that you would add to that list?
No, not. I was going to say for me, for mine rather, it's Maguire and Robertson are certainly almost 100% out the door. I think that we would very much struggle to keep Hernandez. I think that kind of the players that we would be able to keep are more of our core players in your Davies, your Dawsons, your David Milos, your Sean Maloney's. I think they'll be the ones that stay. But yeah, there's no one that I can really picture out of the fold leaving that you haven't already mentioned.
And then I guess I'll get in a word your answers to the next question. We've already discussed it a bit, so it might be a pretty straightforward one. Does El Mohammadi start this week? I'll start with you, Dan.
Nope.
And Logan?
I know I'm only allowed one word, but no way.
And then the last question, which is an interesting one in terms of a tactical point of view. Do we go all-out attack against Swansea? Do we do a Leicester of a couple of seasons ago and really sort of pin our flag to the mast and say, look, either we're going to go down or we're going to go down swinging if we're going to go down. Do we go all-out attack against Leicester? Do we play a 3 up front sort of formation and really try and against Swansea? Do we really go out and try and attack them? Dan?
I don't know about all out and I don't know about 3 up front, but we need to go at least 2 up front.
Logan?
Yeah, we have to throw the kitchen sink at them. I think that this is our cup final, so to speak, as far as the ramifications it has for our season. And I think that Swansea are a team that will be down on confidence travelling to the KC because they certainly, the KCOM rather, because it is, not a ground that they've enjoyed much success at recently. So I think that we definitely attack them.
It's certainly a game where we could use Steve Bruce as manager just to throw striker after striker at them. But thank you both for coming on. You've been our star strikers tonight. Thanks, Logan.
Not a problem. Anytime.
And thank you, Dan.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, everyone, for listening in. Hopefully it's a bit more of a cheerful podcast next week after a pretty important win against Swansea. It's been a pretty dour week after that loss to Liverpool, but hopefully our spirits can get raised and keep on fighting till the end of the season. So until next time, come on, City! You've been listening to the official Hull City Australia podcast. For more discussion, join us on Facebook in the Hull City AFC Australian Supporters Group, or follow us on Twitter at Hull City AFC Oz. The music was created by Amber and Black.
There's no turning back 'cause you're out.